I counted over 120 plus social networks on the internet today. So how should businesses decide what network they should be on? Should they try all of them and try and use them all? And if not, what networks should they try and focus on?
No, I don't think you should try and do 120 unless you've got 24 hours a day that you can spend. But look, for me, I think it comes down to a few things. I think it comes down to knowing where your audience is. For her, Canberra, our main audience and our main driver of traffic is Facebook. Our main audience is Canberra women aged between 20 and 45, so I'm soon going to be out of my core audience, which is a worry. A slightly less than Twitter, and I think Instagram is a growing platform for us. I think you also need to look at the purpose of your communication. I think that, for example, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram are very different platforms in terms of what resonates and what your intent is. I think if you look at local users of social media, for example, Merrymaker Sisters, who are paleo, healthy living girls, have a massive following on Instagram, and that's Instagram is a great thing for fashion and for fitness and healthy eating, whereas I think Facebook is very much more sort of that grassroots group, and Twitter is obviously very intelligent people, but who are interested in media and that current affairs. And I think on the more practical level, I think you actually need to look at what do you have the time and the capacity to manage, because I love Twitter, but I really, really struggle to find the time to interact properly on it, because it really is a hungry beast and you need to sort of really be in the conversation to use it properly. For me, because I'm pretty much a one-woman show backed up by a wonderful team of contributors, for me, Facebook has longevity of content, it offers visuals, so that's where we primarily focus. When we have more resources, we'll try and do sort of, I guess what I see as the key four for us, which are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Pinterest. And also look at evolving technologies as they come up. But that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, not to go too far away from the question, but I firstly want to acknowledge how great this Twitter wall is up here. I've been fascinated by it all night. And I think Tara pretty much pointed it out straight away that it feels like it's everyone's inner thoughts all happening at once. And I'd also like to reference and find out where the other Jamie B is in the crowd, because I do think we've found new friends. Not here? Spotter, over there. We will have a beer after this, and it is great that there's another Jamie B out there. And I do find it fantastic that Twitter has allowed us all this medium to meet a lot of people over the last couple of days, last night and today, that I feel like I know quite well on social media, but I haven't actually met face to face. But in terms of deciding on what networks you are on, I agree completely with Amanda. You really do need to focus on where your audience is, who you're talking to, and you really can't be on everything all at once. As much as people would like to be, and a lot of people try to publish in spurts, you really need to focus on where you're getting the best traction and where people are actually talking to. Funnily enough, I'll actually point out something that I was quite wrong with. I may not be wrong with it yet, but I started spurting off to a lot of people that Google Plus was going to be this huge thing and everyone needs to get on Google Plus because Google's the power and they're just going to create this brilliant thing. But you know what? There's no real point being on there at this stage when the audience is not there. And while a lot of people with a Gmail account now have, by default, a Google Plus account, there's just not a real audience there. So it's really not worth spending your time getting on there and talking to people that aren't really there. So a big part of the people that we work with, our own clients, we do suggest, the big ones in terms of Facebook and Twitter, because that's where the audience lies. But I really feel like LinkedIn, particularly from a B2B and even a government perspective, is something that's really starting to build, and they're starting to do something really good with their own content publishing platforms and allowing people to put out their own thoughts, their own objectives, their own blogs, and particularly with some of the larger thought leaders in the world having the opportunity to put their stuff there as well. So if I put forward...
Got about flat trick.
If I put forward anything, I would say that for a lot of people, LinkedIn should be quite a big focus moving on from here. But I also think that it doesn't work for everyone, and you really need to work with your audience and where they are.
Yeah, I agree with both of those points. But I'd also go back to what Simone said, and like before you think about what sort of platform should you be on, you should be thinking about what's our strategy, what are we trying to achieve, things like that, and then work it out from there. Like social media is not a silver bullet; it's just like a communication channel. It should be used that way.
Yeah, just to add quickly to what everyone else has said, I think certainly in the not-for-profit sector, a lot of NGOs seem to be quite nervous about dipping their toe into the water with some of these platforms, particularly Twitter. And I've had lots of conversations with comms people and CEOs of not-for-profit organisations, and kind of said, oh, look, we're just really worried that if we say something and someone doesn't like what we're doing, we'll have this online attack, and then if we don't respond quickly enough, it'll get even worse. And, I mean, generally my response to those people is that, if you're in a situation where enough people are paying that much attention to you guys that you feel like it's a problem, then it's probably actually not a problem, it's a bit of a win. And chances are you're going to have allies in those spaces, that will look after you and come to your aid. And I think going back to one of Peter's points about, communities regulating themselves. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that there are no risks and that no damage could occur, but, certainly I'm a big fan of just trying, just testing some of these platforms out. And once you've kind of nutted out your objectives and your goals and, what you think might be a good strategy, just try, even in a personal capacity. Jump on Twitter if you've never done it before. See how it works. Who are the kinds of people that are in that space? What's happening? So getting a feel for how these various platforms work is literally a good place to start, I think. And researching your audiences so you know where they're playing and you know where those conversations are happening, really important too.
And I think a lot of it comes with being in the space. You learn when people are active and what is going to engage them, and and how to create that how to create that conversation. And I really think most of us are self-taught. It's just one of those things you just kind of jump into and learn as you go. Although there is now a fantastic 30-day program coming up. Anyone else?
Just lastly, before we move on, I will reference one of the tweets that I saw up there. Yes, Google Plus is beautiful, and I still hold out some hope, but not in public.
Content is king tends to be the buzz phrase, if you will, of today. How and why is it important that businesses embrace content that is relevant to their customers?
I'm going to channel my inner David Pembroke here, and for those of you who know him, he likes to consider himself the godfather of content marketing in Canberra, and he attends an event called Content Marketing World in the States every year. And I feel like they are probably a year or two ahead of us in this space, but Australia is catching up a lot, and some of the real key influential people over there are starting to see a lot more of that in Australia and starting to see some really good examples of businesses creating that relevant content and answering people's questions. So in terms of when we talk about embracing that content and providing something that's relevant to their customers, it's really about building trust. So it's about finding out what the pain points are for your audience, whether that's something that you're trying to sell or whether that's a point that you're trying to put forward or something you're trying to promote. It's really about trying to find out what they want to know about what you're trying to say and answering it in the most simple format and the most digestible format that they can easily consume whenever they want and when they can. So bringing them back to your website is always an important thing. So it's a platform you can control. Whilst everyone in here has those social media presences, as we've heard tonight, it's something that you can't always control. They can change things whenever they like, but something you can always control is your own website and your own content. So developing a strong presence on there, giving yourself enough opportunity to have the time and to speak your own voice, and then you can really start to build up that trust with your customers.
Again, I agree with both you guys. Good content is king. Bad content is not going to do anything for you. So you've got to make sure it's engaging, it's relevant, as we just said. Another thing we should all sort of be considering too is when posting to Facebook, you now have to produce content in terms of how they like to see content. So you've got to think about your engaging content for your audience, and then also what Facebook might consider good quality content and that they will then show to your audience. So memes and things like that are out. Things like new things like small short videos that are uploaded are now considered premium sort of content and get shared to a higher percentage of your audience, because Facebook then own that sort of content and they want more stuff like that. A bit like the congratulations that Simone was talking about. So yeah, it's a good content.
In addition to what has been said, I think probably most people that work in the not-for-profit sector are familiar with the Charity Water crew, who've done an amazing job at creating very compelling content to make a lot of money out of a very small charity water. Yeah. So I thought I'd just share a couple of kind of key points about their approach. So they raised over $8 million in their online platform in 2012 and $33 million in total. I think I read this about a month ago, so it's probably gone up since then. And their director of digital says, "At our core, we are an amazing content marketing shop. We don't buy advertising. We 100% focus on word of mouth marketing. We create amazing content that we can then distribute through the web, through social media, and then we give that to people we hope are passionate advocates who will take the content and share it with their friends." So $9,000 spend, okay, that might be bigger than some of our budgets, certainly bigger than mine, but $33 million outcome. And I would place my money on the fact that it was kind of less about the platforms that they chose and more about the content that they created, and probably the strategy behind reaching some of those people that were going to carry their message and be their champion.
I think it's probably worth noting that, you know, particularly for small businesses, developing content can be very labour intensive and take a lot of time, which if you are a small shop, then, you know, maybe you sort of see it as something that's you better doing the nuts and bolts stuff. But I think it's really important that, I mean, you can have a fantastic piece of content, but if you don't have that distribution network, then it could be the best piece of content in the world, but no one's going to see it. So I think you really need to think, how am I going to actually get people to see this? And that may be, you know, piggybacking on larger sites that can take people back to you. You know, we've got a number of people that write for Her Canberra that do it for the profile to then, you know, build that kind of direction back to their site, because I think there's some fantastic content out there, and I think it just takes a while to get that groundswell. And I guess I'm thinking, for example, the In the City website, which you guys are doing some work on, fantastic content there, and it's starting to build, but it's going to be a while, I think, before they are seen as a destination for content. So I think it's worth, when you are developing, I guess, a content marketing strategy, think beyond what you're actually talking about and think about, how am I actually going to get this out to people, and developing those strong social networking, I guess, relationships with other sites and other social media avenues.
According to a report released by Worth Consulting in 2012, Twitter has the lowest abandon rate. 3% of accounts had no posts in the preceding 90 days since they were open, while blogs had the highest percent of abandonment rate, 31%, in the not-for-profit sector. Additionally, the study found that organisations with more than 1,000 staff were less likely to blog or engage with their clients. If content is king, shouldn't large organisations and small businesses alike embrace blogging? And if yes, where's the best place to start?
Yeah, let's blogger to start. I'll go next.
Awesome. Look, I mean, my advice to anyone who is thinking about starting to blog is to just bloody well start. You know, I think it really is about what you've got to say, rather than how pretty your site is. Or, although any graphic designers and creatives in the room, sorry, Sunny, pretty stuff is very important as well. But look, you know, I think it's just start, because I think these days, if you actually get a good reputation for having something intelligent and smart to say, then people are going to find you. For example, Kate Freeman Nutrition has been one of our contributors since the very beginning of Her Canberra 3 years ago. And I found her when I was looking for contributors around Canberra, and I found her by Googling, trying to find people in the local audience. And she basically attributes the success of her business. So she now employs 4 nutritionists. Her business has grown exponentially in 3 years, but she basically credits the growth of that business with the fact that she started a website, 5 years ago and started blogging about nutrition. She is now, featured not only on Her Canberra, but quite regularly in City News and Canberra Times as sort of an expert. And she's got to that point because she writes great content. So, it can be an incredibly useful tool.
Yeah, just to go on from that, I think everyone can be a blogger, and you don't necessarily need to be a great writer to be a blogger. And what I mean by that is, yes, you still need that quality content, you still need that quality output, but you don't necessarily need to be writing something on paper or typing something on a computer. Some blogs can simply be said by having a chat with a couple of your mates and getting someone to transcribe that information. Maybe that's the way that you like to portray your expertise in a particular field. So I think there's different ways to look at it. Obviously, podcasting is something that's starting to build a lot more in Australia, and if that's something that you feel is a better way for you to get your information out, then that might be the best way to do it. Now, of course, that's still quite labour intensive to sort of produce that and get that up and running as well. So by simply having that conversation with a partner or with a friend or with some trusted networks and allies, and then getting someone to transcribe that information and tighten it up and turn it into something a little bit more, that can be as powerful as sitting behind a computer and starting to put your views down on a keyboard itself. That's my thoughts anyway.
And again, I agree with all that. Blogs need eyeballs, so no point having a blog unless people are looking at it. And from a business perspective, we would tell clients to sort of, little steps first. If you want to get out there, start writing on your Facebook page, on your Twitter account, start doing that regularly, and then think about doing the blogging. And unless you've got a website that you've got high traffic to it, no one's got to read your blog unless you get it out there on social media.
Probably with something like blogging, whether you're doing it as an individual or at an organisational level, recognising the capacity of your resources is really important, obviously. And by that I mean, if you've got someone that really, really loves writing, but maybe they're not the social media person, have a think about how you can use those skills. If you've got someone in the team that's particularly active on social media, but maybe it's not in their job description to look after the organisation's Twitter account or to have ideas about the blog, think about those things, think about how you can use those resources. And also think about, from an audience perspective, if they're interested in particular issues that you don't have the capacity to write about in your blog, think about curating some content. Grab pieces of content that you think will interest them that are already out there and kind of put together your own piece so you can kind of maintain the demands of a blog in that way too. But again, maybe I'm harping on about this point, but I think there's no one-size-fits-all to approach to this kind of stuff. It's less about the platforms and more about what you're trying to achieve and what your audience wants. There's lots of ways to go about it, and I don't think there's a black and white answer in terms of blog yes, Twitter no.
How many Facebook posts a week would you suggest? Because I think we do no more than 3, so I don't want to be a pest.
Per week?
Per week.
Do more. Yeah,
And look at when your audience is online, as Simone was saying. So see where they peak and put it on there. And also think about what you're putting up there to make sure it stays. And if obviously the more people that share it, the more people are going to see it. Yeah.
It's about the newsfeed, You've
Yeah.
got to be there in people's newsfeed these days. It's similar to Twitter. At the same time, it's that delicate balance. You don't want to be too spammy. But I find that your followers will tell you in your face, and you'll see that by your unlikes or people literally telling you going to miss it.
I think people get more frustrated probably with more emails.
Yeah.
I think people probably get frustrated with more emails than they do more social media posts. But I quite often get scared sometimes that if I put a post up on Facebook within, 2 hours, that it's going to steal the thunder from that other post, and not from a sense of the audience, but, the Facebook algorithms that we just can't understand. But I think any sort of gap between 2 or 3 hours, you can put more stuff up. So anything from 3 to 4, sometimes 5, depending on how big the gaps are, I think is okay and it's fine.
And if your audience doesn't mind, post away.
Usually.
Usually,
Who doesn't
yeah.
like music?
Yep, done that.
We're just looking at venturing into blogging. We've got a lot of people who work at Early Childhood Australia, a lot of people who are interested in hearing from early childhood experts about parenting, but also early childhood services engaging with technology. We've got some people who are keen to write, but we're not sure about how often to blog. So once a week, twice a week. And I suppose we've got a lot of momentum now, people are keen, but we're worried that's going to kind of die and we're going to have to pay people for blogging or get into other areas, I guess, that might be a little more challenging. So do you have any recommendations around how often to blog? We get about traffic of 2.5 million to our website each year. So there's a lot of traffic coming through, and we think there's a real audience there, and people are asking us for that too. They want to hear from the experts, I suppose, but we're not sure how often. I guess we're thinking once a week to start with. I don't know if that's a good starting point though. Like literally next week we're going to start.
That's a pretty incredible community that you've got right there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Have you guys thought about just giving some of them a call and having a chat with them about what would be useful for them?
Probably should do that. A lot of it comes from them actually telling us already. Like, can you have your tech expert tell us about how we engage children with technology? What's the screen time recommendation for children? That type of thing is what we're already getting. So people wanting, it's particularly around technology actually, which is kind of relevant for tonight, but it's also people just asking questions about in-house early childhood experts. They want to know, can you write a piece on nutrition for children, or can you write a piece on this? So that's where it's coming from. We tend to do short posts on Facebook and they get a lot of engagement, but then people want to hear something from an expert with a face to it.
I mean, I don't know your organisation and I'm not in the team, but I would love to know more about that audience. Maybe you can just whack together a bit of a SurveyMonkey survey and send it out to a portion of that community and ask them questions like, are these the topics that are going to be useful for you? If we engage these experts, would you like to hear from them? How frequently would you like to hear from them? Would you contribute something to this blog? To try and understand them a little bit more, because I don't know, maybe you guys will disagree with me completely and that's cool. But I don't think there's a magic number for how many times to post. I think it's all about the needs of that community that you're trying to engage with.
If you guys have got people asking you those questions and demanding sort of answers, well, not demanding, I'm sure they're not demanding, but okay, they're demanding. You are literally in the perfect scenario, and I'm sure there's lots of other people in this room that are doing a lot of content and doing a lot of blogging, and they're probably doing more than people are asking questions. So I think you guys are in the perfect opportunity to be able to say, here's a bunch of questions that we're going to answer, here's the amount of time that we're going to do it over, we're going to go and find those experts, and if they don't want to talk to us, there's going to be another expert that's going to want to talk to that many people. So once a week is a great start, and I think you should try that for a month or two. But you guys could easily be posting once a day using a network of experts. It's just a matter of someone being able to get in touch, hassle them to send you the blog on time, and to get it out there. But once you can, there's a lot of people that would like to talk to that size of an audience.
I guess my advice would be to have a bit of a plan to start, have a content plan. Think about, if you are going to blog once a week, what are you going to be blogging about, and be organised. Multi-contributor models are great. But yeah, it's good to try and run a little, quasi-newsroom kind of setup. And there are some great sort of open source tools out there that you can do that with. But I think, having a good plan for what you're going to do ahead is the way to go.
We'll grab one more from the floor.
Tagging with blogs. How many tags should you put on a post optimally?
I am not the metadata expert.
Look, I mean, it really depends on how many different types of things you're trying to talk about. It can quite often look a bit spammy if you see a lot of tags. There's probably 2 to 3, possibly 4 really important things within any given blog post. So I would suggest that's probably around your optimum number. But it obviously depends on the type of content you're putting out there, the length of content you're putting out, the platform you're on, how visual those tags are, whether that affects the user experience, whether people are using those to actually filter through the content on your website. There's a few sort of different scenarios to it, but I would be careful in overdoing it with tags.
Yep, agree. Too many tags is not good.
What does the future of social media look like?
I can't tell you the answer to that question, but I can tell you what I'm excited about. I'm really excited about the idea that was brought up in the last panel, which is collaboration online, particularly for not-for-profits when it comes to affecting positive social change. Really excited about some of the tools that are currently under development. The Rockefeller Foundation's working on a tool at the moment that's all about enhancing the profile of digital storytelling and making it much easier for people to do that in the online space, particularly not-for-profits. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm really pumped about seeing in the next couple of years, maybe even before that. I've been hassling out their comms person on Twitter a bit about it, so yeah.
From a advertising marketing sort of point of view, word of mouth advertising marketing is like sort of was the holy grail, but now social media has come along and now it's like the supercharged version of that. It's sort of almost limitless on how far it can go. So just really exciting to see what's going to happen, and really interesting times with what happens with Facebook over the next 12 months.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what Facebook does as well. It's a frustrating fight now for a lot of people to put something up that you feel like is really valuable content, and it can be valuable content, but without someone actually making that action on it, so liking, sharing, commenting on it, you do miss out on that point. So I'm really interested to see what reaction Facebook does over the next year or so as more and more people get frustrated. And I was actually talking to someone a little bit earlier on, and he was saying that over in the UK, a lot more people are starting to focus on Twitter because the Facebook just is not generating them as much as what they'd hoped to previously. And I think that's going to start to happen a lot more in Australia as well. So I'll be interested to see how people go about that, because obviously the biggest audience, 13 million people on Facebook in Australia as opposed to 2.5 million people on Twitter. The biggest audience is obviously the one that everyone wants to get to, but it's really important to find where the most people are responding to your content. So I'll be really interested to see where it goes, and I'm going to be keeping a close eye on Google.
Look, I don't know what the future of social media looks like. I first pretty much waded into Twitter in 2009, and just the changes that have happened in our, I guess, how we consume social media and how we interact with social media has just changed so massively in 5 years. Even a year or two ago, I used to take weekends off social media because no one was really on it that much. And these days, weekends and evenings and public holidays are high points. So, it's become one of these things that it is such an integral part of our lives, and that is both exciting as a publisher, but it's also scares the crap out of me as a parent, because I'd actually like my children to, have a real life kind of existence. But, it's... I'm also excited by the collaborative aspect. Her Canberra, I see our Facebook page more so than perhaps the other channels very much as a community, and we treat it as such, not just a way to push people to our content. So I'm excited to see how we can continue to grow that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting times, I think.